Hi, I'm Nico and welcome to my channel. My first attempt with epoxy resin went horrible. I have been asked before if I make mistakes in Gunpla modeling, and I do. Just like everyone, I make mistakes from time to time. But often, I can find a way to resolve it, save the project, or just find a way to finish it in spite of my mistakes. But on this project, however, I failed big time. I am currently working on a few different projects that I can hopefully finish and be able to post soon. But in the meantime, I decided to share this failed project and talk about why it's important as modelers and artists to fail. The kit in this build is the entry-grade RX-78-2 that I customized about a year ago. I kept it in storage because I was planning to add some weathering and do a diorama for it. And then a couple of weeks ago, my dad bought some epoxy resin because we've always wanted to try making resin dioramas. This project ended up being the test piece to see if we can actually do it or not. Well, as it turns out, resin art is not as easy as it looks. I decided to just make a small rectangular base since I did not want to use up too much of the resin, considering that this is a test piece. And then not a lot of planning went into it since I simply wanted to see how resin works. I started with a piece of blue foam and then carved out a rough shape with a cutter and art knife. Once I was happy with how it looks, I applied some heat with a lighter. This makes the blue foam firmer and look more organic and natural. After that, I started applying some texture paint. My go-to texture paint is Vallejo's Brown Earth. So I used it to cover up the foam before letting it dry overnight. In just a couple of hours. After that, I covered up the sides with some pla plate to make it look presentable. Before I covered up the gaps with some air dry clay. The air dry clay that I have does not really dry as hard, like it stays soft, so I did not have to wait for it to dry before I covered it up with some more texture paint. Now let's talk about how I failed horribly. This is my first time pouring resin or working with resin. This is when I make my first mistake. I did this without the proper tools and materials late into the night. Second mistake is thinking that I can use pla plate to seal the resin in place. I used super glue to stick the pla plate in place as well as some tape, which I thought would be enough, and that was my third mistake. During my first pour, a lot of resin leaked out of one side. I had to start again, and this time I sealed off all the sides with the hot glue gun, and that solved the issue. I did not have a scale to measure the resin, so I used a measuring cup, which is another mistake, because while you can eyeball the thinning ratio of paint, you can never ever eyeball the ratio of resin unless you want to fail. I thought getting rid of the bubbles would be easy, since all I have to do is to use a lighter or blowtorch. And what do you know, the lighter won't even turn on. It died when I needed it the most. I couldn't even borrow or buy another one since it was late at night. I ended up just letting it be, since I figured I can always just cover up the sides, then add some waves on top, then problem solve. Now, after all that mess, it was time to let it cure. I simply covered it up away from dust and dirt with some tissue paper. It was supposed to be dry in just over a day, but when I checked it, it was still gummy and sticky to the touch. I ended up leaving it alone for about a week before I was able to touch the top part. So I figured since the top was dry and cured, that everything is the same. So I recorded myself removing or attempting to remove the flat plates. Some parts were easier to remove, but most of it were not. Then, when I got to the bottom part on the front, apparently it's still not cured and it even leaked out just like how it was a week ago. That's when I knew I failed. It was full of bubbles and the bottom part is not even dry, let alone cured. Because of this project, I've come to realize the need to embrace failure. Everybody has always been scared to fail because it's seen as something negative, especially in the school setting. But personally, I think that failing is part of the process. A lot of the time in Gunpla or plastic modeling or art in general, there is this thing my family calls salba mode. It's when something we're working on is not turning out as planned, and we have to think of a way to save it and make it look at least decent enough. This happens more often than you think, because fail moments happens a lot in art. At the end of the day, your work must suck for you to get better. If you're too afraid of failure, chances are you won't be very good at anything. What I'm trying to say is, we should allow ourselves to fail if we want to succeed. After all, this is just a hobby. Nobody would arrest you if you failed at airbrushing your kit for the first time. I've never really shown my failures and mistakes in Gunpla because why would I? But I figured it would be nice to share it with you guys since it is part of the process. I like trying new things when it comes to Gunpla modeling, and when you try something new, failure always comes next. And that's fine because we can always try again. That's it for today's video. I hope I can finish one of my projects soon and share it with you. But in the meantime, this is all for now. Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe and watch my other videos.